The British and the Spanish both attempted to impose a new rule of law upon their respective colonized nations. Though they both changed the religious practices and laws of their nations, they did so very differently. The Spanish used religion as a driving force behind colonization, forcefully constructing the Catholic religion and working hard to convert their newfound natives. Conversely, the British force behind colonization of India was almost entirely economic, so any conversion and construction of the Christian religion was almost purely done by choice. Although both colonizers utilized religion differently, the end result was the same: liberation. While the British used religion as a tool for subservience, the Spanish used it to foster harmony and unity between the natives and conquistadors. The English gave the Indians token freedoms that kept them right on the edge of rebellion. Likewise, the Spanish sought to unify the natives in the sense that they wanted to reap the benefits that new churchgoers would bring. The benefits being that the Spanish could easily claim that they were of higher status than the Indians because they were from the religious lands of Spain. If the Indians remained practicing their own religion, they wouldn't understand the hierarchy. The difference between the British and the Spanish and their respective uses of religion while colonizing can be analyzed using photographs from the time period. The Bicol Church is a prime example of England's colonization of not only the people of India, but also its ability to suppress the population. The Bicol Church represents Great Britain and other European powers' ability to inadvertently impose their religion upon a nation. In India's case, Great Britain establishes Christianity as the unannounced ruling religion of the nation. The Indian people would have never allowed a foreign church to be built on their grounds, let alone a foreign religion to be the ruling power. The token gifts of freedom the British fed the Indians to suppress them just enough so that they didn't rise up against their power. Another freedom the British gave the Indians in order to keep them from rising up was their freedom of religion, in a sense at least. Indians were allowed to convert to the Christian faith and in some instances attend church. As you can see by the photograph, although sharing some Gothic architecture with the British counterparts, the church also expresses Indian culture. The Indian culture expressed in the church's architecture illustrates the freedom that the British gave the Indian population in terms of religion. The Jain temple in the same city as the previous church further illustrates the idea that the British were more relaxed when it came to the worshipping of non-Christian religions. The temple represents the British's attempt at giving the illusion of freedom in the region, when in reality Christianity was the ruling religion of the region. In fact, the British even tried to follow a religiously neutral rule of order by establishing different laws based on the person's religion, called personal laws. At the time, this seemed like the perfect combination of laws that would make everyone happy. However, as more and more cases came about, it became apparent that these personal laws easily conflicted with one another. These types of laws simply weren't put in place in the Spanish Central American colonies. Instead, the Spanish forced their religion upon the natives and disallowed all non-Catholic practices. The Parish Church seen here in the photograph is a church found in Mexico in the 1800s. It's a noticeably Catholic church. The high towers, the crosses, and the complexity of the architecture all draw from their Spanish counterparts in the Old World. There isn't a hint of Native American culture in the building. This is because of the way the Spanish used religion during the colonization of Central America. It's also why you can't find any traces of what used to be a thriving tribal religion. In order to bring about a desirable hierarchy amongst the native peoples, the Spanish would have to create a unified measurement of royalty. The easiest way of doing that is religion. The Spanish sought to religiously unify the people of Central America by converting them to what they believed to be the correct religion. This turned out to be a greater feat than the Spanish had ever anticipated, as the natives resisted the conversion to Catholicism. The Pyramid of the Sun used to belong to the long-forgotten Tenochtitlan Empire. Now it stands as a symbol of a religion left behind. This pyramid pictured here in the photograph represents what used to be a prosperous religion. The Spanish conquistadors not only invaded the natives' land, but their right to practice their own religion. After the swift victory the Spanish had, they began to outlaw any and all religious practices that didn't coincide with their particular views. Thus began a conquest for the annihilation of all competing religions in the region. Going back to the idea that the Spanish sought to unify the natives and the Spaniards using Catholicism, the Spanish used their religion to establish a hierarchy among the natives in order to rule over them properly. Yet another example of how the Spanish used religion while colonizing is this relic of a sacrificing stone that you see before you. As soon as the Spanish could help it, they stopped the sacrificing of humans. This was an attempt to further reinforce the idea that any religion not referencing the Spain and its Spanish supremacy was outright wrong. Not only did they conquer the native populations of Central America, but they made a stop to the sacred practice of an already weary people from war. Although the British similarly colonized the Indian nation for economic gain, they took a neutral stance on the issue of religion, unlike the Spanish. This is seen in the photographs of the different religious practices in the same town. This photograph illustrates just how accepting the British were of other religions compared to their conquistador counterparts. The men in this picture are freely and openly practicing their religion. Meanwhile, behind their backs, the British are reporting every move the Indians are making and calling them savages in newspapers back home. While they did outlaw some things like sati, the British allowed the native peoples of India to practice their own religions as they pleased. This is because the British used religion as a sort of bartering system in order to establish a British ruling power. By creating the personal laws, the British did their best to establish a system of laws that allowed the free practice and protections of those practices. These laws helped to establish the same idea that the colonizer is the ruler. The British were telling the Indian people what they could do in accordance with their religion, giving the illusion of control, but in reality, the British had the power. The Spanish directly affected their colonized people by intimidating them. The Spanish directly affected their colonized people by immediately establishing themselves as the ruling party. Conversely, the British took the more diplomatic route by giving the illusion of power when in actuality, they were slowly establishing themselves as the sole political power in the region.